Hello, everyone. Welcome to August's Asking for a Friend. Asking for a Friend is brought to you by Never Not Creative, Youngbloods, Agda, Streamtime, and Mentally Healthy. This exists because we wanted to create a safe place for where you can ask the unaskable, the questions that you're worried may change the way people treat you at work or affect the opportunities that might be given to you. So we bring together industry leaders and mental health professionals to give non-judgmental responses in a safe, anonymous environment. Before I introduce our guests this month, a little bit of housekeeping. You can ask questions in the questions tab on the right-hand side. So please do that. Obviously, you're here for a reason. Your chance to ask a question for a friend. Please get them in early so that we've got lots of time to be able to get to them during the session. We do have some questions that have come in beforehand. So yeah, please jump those over. And if you've got any other comments or links that you think might be interesting for other people based on the topics that are getting discussed, feel free to put those into the chat. If you need more immediate help, consider getting in touch with any of the following resources that we've put on the link in the chat. A caveat in that everything that we do with Never Not Creative and Mentally Healthy is volunteer run, and essentially it's unofficial. So we're a bunch of people who use community to come together and tackle the challenges that our industry is facing. So bear that in mind, that also, with your questions being anonymous today, we don't have context for them. So we'll do the best with what we have. And I think what you'll find is this will be a great first step to getting some good advice, but then being able to go further and asking, other professionals or services or even kind of friends and peers. So with the housekeeping out of the way, I'm delighted to welcome back Jess Lilley. Jess is a creative director and founder of the Open Arms in Melbourne. She's been doing the ad thing pretty solidly since 2000, when she was listening to a lot of big riffs and working for peanuts in the independent music industry. But as fate would have it, Jess took a one-off freelance copywriting gig to make ends meet, and thus began a globe-trotting journey, reveling in the pirate ship-like camaraderie, inventiveness, occasional weirdness, and always team-spiritedness of creative departments in cities near and far. Throughout her career, Jess has continued to balance work with personal creative projects across public radio, photography, film, and theatre, and is now in charge of everything of your own, I guess, of the Open Arms, with a few co-founders and doing great things. Right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we have Ash. Ash King is a psychologist, writer, designer, and cyber psychology researcher at the University of Sydney. After her life in the music industry came to a halt following a vocal injury, she's now using psychology and mindfulness to help folks live their best lives with creativity, passion, and purpose. She's worked across a range of creative fields, including film and TV, live music, visual arts, radio, and run workshops and talks for Amazon, Pinterest, Linktree, Pedestrian, TV, Opera, and Big Sound. She believes that learning to manage the mind can be a fun and inquisitive process. Through insight, wisdom, and a splash of pop culture, she helps individuals and organizations develop practical skills to go deep, get wise, and be happy. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I feel like we couldn't have teamed up two people better.
I know, I'm so excited.
You could almost write both of your bios almost kind of the same.
We should just become a small superpower, a super group.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so we're going to get into the questions. Everybody watching, please don't forget to put your own questions into the chat as well. And if you sent a question in beforehand, we are about to ask them now. So, Jess, I'm going to come to you first.
Mm-hmm.
Big question. Do you think we'll ever be able to protect our mental health and prevent burnout when our whole industry is built in a way that means that we can't say no to clients?
Wow, that is covering a lot of ground. I'm going to start with the second part first, because I don't think the issue with our industry is that we can't say no to clients. I think that's a symptom of a systemic problem with the industry. My background is in advertising, but I think it's quite similar in media and other commercial creative industries, design. I think that the industry itself has for a long time kind of put self-interest in front of the health and well-being and even safety sometimes of its employees. And thankfully now I'm not just some, bitter, raving old loony with this opinion, because the Ad Council of Australia released a report last month I think some of you probably filled out a census last year in December. They had a census going for 2 weeks, and it was a snapshot of the state of the industry at the moment. And the report just came out last month. And some of the data is actually really alarming and kind of demonstrates that the industry itself had some systemic problems. Like, I think there was like 8% of women had experienced sexual harassment in the last 12 months. 25% of women reported being bullied. That jumped up to 51% for gender non-conforming people, and even 15% of men is terrible. If that's your experience, being bullied is quite kind of huge. There were loads of other statistics. Obviously, they did go into a little bit, not necessarily race, but ethnicity, but quite alarming experiences of discrimination, much higher experiences of discrimination with people of colour, either experiencing or observing discrimination, and also wanting to leave the industry. They then also went into a lot of stuff about experiences of microaggressions and macroaggressions, and it's just rife within the industry. And even comparing sort of Australia to the UK and America, we are falling behind. You know, as an industry, we have some serious sort of health and safety issues, and they're systemic. They're not just one agency here and there. And, you know, we're not progressive when it comes to culture. Even things like of LGBTQIA+ responders, 33% said that they hide their sexuality because they're not sure how it will be received at work. So this idea that because we're a creative industry means we're somehow, you know, culturally progressive or on the cutting edge of culture is just wrong when it comes to workplace and health and safety. So anyone who in your workplace that is blaming clients is scapegoating their own systems for the, you know, in terms of the problem. And I think that sets a really bleak scene. But I think hopefully, you know, for me, knowledge is power. And knowing that as someone who works in the industry, you know, knowing that, you know, there is this systemic problem, then I think the first thing that you need to do is protect yourself and look after your own mental health, and be aware of your own signs of burnout, and put your own boundaries in place in your own workplace, and understand that, you know, just as clients will take whatever agencies give, agencies will take whatever employees give. And so I think it's really beholden on us. You know, if the people at the top aren't gonna change, then, you know, by all means, look after yourself, I guess, is the first thing. The other thing I think is that there are some movements helping promote change. Things like, you know, the aunties who have come about as a you know, just a bunch of women working in the industry in response to ongoing issues of sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination, have created a really solid network of women supporting women within Melbourne. I know that you guys, watching, a lot of you are part of Youngbloods, and I think you know, silence is power sometimes in bad work environments. So the more that you can talk about, you know, if your own workplace has issues around lack of mental health safety and high incidence of burnout, the more that you can come together and talk about it. You know, safety in numbers. And if you do let them know, if you let your organisation know, if you don't think they're doing enough about it, and then they still continue the same work practices, then, you know, they're being negligent, I suppose. So I think be open, put your own boundaries in place, talk to your peers, and, you know, yeah, let's all try and support each other and change it as much as we can.
I think companies are having to listen. There's definitely more and more of that. We've seen more of it. I've actually done now 2 asking for a friends privately for a couple of big agency groups. And it's been a great opportunity for people to get the questions out there and to raise some of the issues that perhaps were kind of like, you know, swept under the rug before. So I think they do have to listen. Ash, do you have a view on, like, how do we protect our own kind of mental health, prevent burnout? Do you have tips around that?
Yeah, look, I'm going to back Jess up with really acknowledging that it's not an individual, the onus shouldn't be on the individual. And that's sometimes where I find these conversations can go awry. A lot of people think, oh, I'm burning out, oh, I'm overwhelmed, or my mental health is suffering. What am I doing wrong? And they tend to sort of turn the lens around to almost judge themselves. And you know what? It's not just like a one person. You can't sort of self-care away discrimination, racism, like capitalist greed. You can't. And man, I wish that I had the answers here. I'm sure we all do. I think we're starting to move towards hopefully a culture where we can have these conversations and not be totally laughed at. And like you said, a lot of organizations are now actually having to be held more accountable. And maybe that is because, their bottom line is suffering with mental illness being, one of the highest causes for absenteeism at work. For whatever reason, our workplaces, we spend a third of our lives working, like we may as well make those places as enriching, fulfilling, safe and trusting as possible. So, I think on an individual level, if you're asking this question, I definitely feel like you probably already have, gone, well, am I getting enough sleep? Am I drinking enough water and eating healthy? All the basics, right? And so, yeah, it's about how we can balance, our individual autonomous purpose to take care of ourselves, but also hold our workplaces accountable too.
And you can say no to clients, by the way.
Oh, 100%.
Right? That's a big part.
I mean, it makes me mad when a question like this comes up that sort of suggests that, there's a culture within the agency is like, well, client can't say no to clients. Like, imagine going to a big client and frankly, with that data, that report, in comparison to other corporate sectors, ours fared worse. So the clients are actually better at looking after the mental health of their employees than we are as an industry. And imagine if an agency went to a client and said, oh yes, we'd love to, thanks for we'd love to do this, although the ask is too much within the timeline. It's going to put undue stress on our on our staff, and as part of our own internal mental health policy, we're going to need another week or two. What client is going to turn around and go, no, you must work them into the ground? I think that we have to recognize the industry has a problem. And I'm glad you brought up accountability, Ash, because we unfortunately have this, we exist in a bubble. There's this sort of self-fulfilling ecosystem of, publications, agencies, awards, and it all kind of feeds into each other. There's a lack of accountability, and I think it's really, it's time for people to stand up and say, I'm not going to work like this. And there are plenty of agencies where that will look after your mental health because they do recognize that their people are all they've got, really.
Yeah, excellent. I feel like this is the perfect time to bring up our mentally healthy survey.
Oh, actually, yes, of course.
Well, we've done 2018, we've done 2020, and everyone here is now the first people to hear about 2022. Oh, so here's your chance to take part. I actually did speak to the ACA about the Create Space survey, and we've looked at, one of the things I found interesting was the microaggressions part that came out. So we've actually included that in our survey to see if we can kind of get more insight into what those microaggressions, like where they're coming from or what they're really affecting, and where are they found the most. So if you get 20-25 minutes over the next few days, please go and fill that out and share it with as many people as possible. It would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think this data is really important because agencies can't pretend that they don't know there's a problem if it's, if this exists.
Absolutely. All right. Jess and I are going to sit back and wait to be therapied now. Is that a word? Is that a verb?
Therapized.
Therapized. Yeah. Okay. So this next question is fantastic. Not one that we've had before. So Ash, how can I be alone but not alone?
I do love this question.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. And I think that I guess we'll have to give it some context. Also, not knowing exactly maybe what was implied by, the use of the word alone. When I hear it, I kind of think, how can I be alone but not lonely? I think in our, particularly in Western societies, we really do have this notion that being by yourself is somehow being lonely. And it's a bit of a mistake to immediately correlate the two. I think that time spent in solitude can be incredibly enriching. And I imagine that a lot of us have maybe learnt this over the past couple of years when we were forced to be spending more time on our own. That being said, we are incredibly social species, and a lot of the most enriching parts of our lives are the times that we spend connected with other people. So I can completely understand how someone would go, okay, so I don't want to really be on my own, but I also still want to be maybe left alone from time to time. And, in psychology, we also have means of sort of testing one's personality. There's something called a Big Five, and that often puts people on a scale of sort of introversion to extroversion. I don't know if any of you have ever done one of these, but a lot of people find themselves at different parts of this scale. I have done this many times. I always end up smack bang in the middle. So I do love my time with people. I love socially connecting, but I also like time alone to recharge. The thing about being lonely is that we don't want to be lonely when it's not a choice. We want to be lonely when it's an active decision that we're making. And there was actually a really interesting study that came out just last year about the relationship between a preference for solitude and life satisfaction. It turns out that if you want to be by yourself, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to live an unhappy life. But the drive to spend time in solitude must be mindfully led. So it must be something that you're like, I am going to spend this time by myself, and here is how I'm going to make it enriching for me. So I think that, by all means, you can have this quest of having your alone time. But I do think that none of us sort of make it out there without people by our side to support us, to rely on when we need them. I think that if you're just very clear with the people that you're close to about what this alone time means for you and how important it is. I know a lot of people get the guilt when they kind of cancel plans because they had plans to spend some time, just like hanging out on their own in their own company. And they think, oh God, I have to say, yes to every invite that comes my way. And that's, I don't think that's important either. I don't think that you have to, give yourself over to social occasions every time you get an invite. But, being clear to the people that surround you that, your alone time is something that is very fulfilling and is a priority. And then, give yourself permission to enjoy it.
I have to say that I might have on occasion wished for a cheeky little lockdown over the last few months. Just to slow things down a little bit.
It's true, isn't it? I think we got like when that lockdown happened. I mean, it's hard for me being in Sydney to compare my lockdown with yours, Jess, being in Melbourne. But there was that feeling where, I didn't mind it, and I quite like my solitude. But again, it's one of those things. It's like, can you be in control of it?
Mm-hmm. I also find if you're asking about being by yourself, being able to feel comfortable by yourself without feeling lonely, I love just noodling around with funny little communities online as well. Like, there's great ways to connect with people that don't require the ongoing sort of, real life contribution that you need to make to real life relationships.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm going to share a book that I read recently, which is really, it's kind of a great story about being alone. So I'm just going to stick it in the chat there. It's very entertaining.
There's also another one, Quiet by Susan Cain, who's an amazing researcher, and she talks about the power of introverts. There we go.
It's so quiet that you can't.
Can't
It's
even
like
say
an
it.
emboss.
Oh,
Yeah, there we go.
wow. Some nice embossing there on the cover.
Yes.
It's a beautiful book that gives a little bit of weight to the importance of, spending time on our own and being able to claim that for ourselves, as opposed to being pulled to this pressure of, being the extrovert, being the life of the party, which, Western culture really, idolizes, I suppose.
Well, and it's hard, isn't it, for extroverts to understand that that's something that you might enjoy.
Yeah. Although another interesting part of the equation is when you look at the research is that introverts also really do benefit from and find a lot of well-being when they do connect socially. But those social connections need to be quite rich and deep. So it's kind of like, introverts probably get a little less out of sort of small talk and being at parties or networking. But when they can sit down and really get into a topic, explore something that they really love or share something really close to them, then that is also very good for the soul.
Yeah, great. I I bought this book because I am more of an introvert and my wife is more of an extrovert and my daughter is more of an introvert. And so we're going to read it together.
Sounds like a party.
Because, it does, doesn't it? Whereas my son is constantly telling me how amazing he is. So next question. Jess, what advice do you have for new parents trying to integrate back into the workforce?
Oh, Jesus. Get a therapist.
You've done this twice.
Look, I've done this twice. And it was pretty, there were pros and cons both times. I guess the thing that I found actually quite positive the first time, if you're a new parent, if it's your first time parent, is I found I was so much more productive at work during the time I was there because I had this, deadline. I had to go home and care for a child. And I actually had to get up pretty early and all that sort of stuff. My time suddenly became, very precious. And so from 9 till 5 or whatever it was, I was super productive, way more probably than I was, as a young creative, just hanging out. And so I think I kept reminding myself of that and really trying not to carry any sort of guilt associated with my own shift in how I was working. And also, I also found like I was very refreshed when I came back to work in the morning because I had to cut off any thinking time about work. When I got home, I was in a completely different mode. I was parenting, so there was no kind of overthinking things or carrying any of the problems through. So the next morning I was bang ready to go again. And I made sure that I really acknowledged that with myself. But I think another really important thing to do is, and it took me a while to do this, and I was just talking to to my partner Amy about this before, is to be really upfront about how you are going to best work now, what your availability is best, how you like to communicate. If you have a job where sometimes, if you think maybe there's going to be a question after you leave, to say, hey, I'm happy to, if you text me a question and I might be able to respond by email after this time or whatever it might be, any of the kind of things that you might associate as negatives about you coming back as a new parent, just sort of try and nip them in the bud a bit and just find new approaches for them and just be really open from a communication point of view with work. Because I've seen, on the flip side, it can really hammer people's insecurity when they go back to work. As a new parent, you've been in this very other different world for a long time. And suddenly you kind of you feel like the muscle memory takes a little bit of time to kick back in. I do want to say that like the reality is, workplaces are getting better at supporting parents within our industry. Some are much better at it. And I still think our industry is coming to grips with it a little bit. Again, that Ad Council report, something like 53% of women said that they, I've got it written down here. 51% of women said parental leave negatively impacted their career compared to 3% of men. So I think you have to be a realist. And if you do feel like perhaps you're being treated differently or discriminated against, I think my number one piece of advice is please try and not let that affect you personally. Be mad about that rather than taking it on board as your own failing, because the fact is it is a problem across the industry. There is discrimination against parents in some organisations. So I think I guess that would be some of my main advice is, communicate your best ways of working, and be really let people know in the organisation if you feel like it's there's been some negative impact to your way of working that's through no fault of your own.
Yeah, great. I'm just adding in the there's the Mavens wrote a great article on the Ad Council survey, and also highlighting the pay gap and the parental leave.
I didn't even mention that one. The pay gap's gone up.
Yeah.
The gender pay gap's gone up.
Yeah. I think, it is really tough on mums, particularly if, people aren't communicating. In my experience, I was one of the first mums in my own group, and was just like, I'm going to be able to do it all. And then you're confronted with the cruel reality that it's kind of not doable. And you need to sort of take stock of, okay, well, what is achievable for me now, not only with the time that I've got available, but also with, maybe sleep deprivation, if you're copying, daycare sickness after daycare sickness. There's heaps that just, lands on your plate and you might not have expected it. So, yeah, it's also about being flexible and kind of kind to yourself too, because it's going to be a hard ride.
Absolutely. And I think that, your circumstances have changed and your employer needs to support you. I mean, parental leave policies are should be about just as much about returning to work as they are, what happens when you take time off. I have experienced discrimination after coming back and having a child, after coming back after parental leave. And I was shocked, I tell you. I thought my brain and my abilities were valued. And then I realized, no, you just wanted my ass on a seat 24 hours a day. And it's really rough, but I think, again, know that this is an industry-wide problem if you are facing discrimination, and please, put your hand up and try and get some support and some help, and talk to people, even if it's reaching out to other new parents who kind of work in a similar workplace or who might be experiencing similar. In fact, actually, there was a Creative Mums, was it? Someone's
someone's looking at all the parental policies in advertising at the moment. It's Mums in Ads, I think. I think Leah is about to let us know. Maybe. But I think, if you search out, I'm grabbing a couple of links right now. There's a great organization called Circle In, who, I think this is Circle In here.
Mums in Ads. Thanks, Leah. I think, again, this is like there is a community there for you. There's so many people who are going through this, who have been through it, and it can be quite an isolating time just becoming a new parent, and hugely challenging. And just please talk to people. Don't, I found sometimes I became overwhelmed as a new parent with things I was going through. And then as soon as I talk to other people, I'm like, oh, wow, that is a burden lifted,
Yeah, it really becomes normalized. I think, you're trying to suffer in silence, and we think that we should often because so many other people can do it. But often other people are still having a hard time too. It makes it easier to talk.
We're all shit at it.
Yeah, we are.
Okay,
great.
Next question.
God love them.
Ash, what initiatives have you seen that actually improve mental well-being and cultures at work?
Yeah, I mean, I love this question, and this is a question that should be shouted loud and clearly constantly. Okay, so first off, I'll say that it's very difficult to, I guess, get the metrics in order to understand whether certain sort of workplace well-being initiatives are effective, because there's so many other variables at play here. And it's like, yes, we know what's happening in the workplace, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes in people's home lives, like what they're doing, what's going on for them. So it's difficult to sort of just isolate, okay, well, these initiatives have actually been effective. In saying that, a lot of places do want to try and make a difference. However, as with everything, it's, not as easy as putting on, like a yoga workshop and then afterwards make your own smoothie day. Like there's so much more that goes into taking care of our mental well-being. And the first thing I'll say is that mental health and mental well-being aren't the same. Mental health is sort of on a spectrum with mental illness, whereas mental well-being is kind of what we're talking about in a state where, nothing is necessarily wrong, like you don't have a diagnosable or a clinical condition, mental health condition, I should say. However, we can still sort of improve the quality of our existence, almost, feel better in our lives. And so I think that what needs to happen is that these workplace initiatives need to focus on well-being, because interventions that focus on helping people out of mental illness are not the same necessarily as the ones that will help people, I guess, thrive in the workplace, to be more connected with their employees, with the type of work that they're doing. So I'll put 3 points that I think are quite essential. And one of them is that organizations really need to start investing in mental health education. So just starting to have conversations for everyone to get a really clear idea of what mental health actually means, how it impacts us, what are the factors that influence mental health and well-being. And this needs to be something that we can just have open conversations with all the time. I think we're slowly getting better with that. There also needs to be sort of flexibility in workplace policies. So, we've all got lives aside from work, and we need our workplaces to understand that. I think if COVID did anything good, it was almost allow or make people feel more entitled to ask for greater flexibility within their working conditions. Another thing is with leaders, if you're in a sort of a managerial role or you're leading a team, there needs to be a display of compassion and almost suitable vulnerability. Yes, I get the whole when you have to lead strong and don't show any weakness, but we're kind of beyond that. So we need to also say, as a leader, you need to show compassion, you need to be kind, lead with humility, because leaders are in this incredible position to really have an impact on their team's mental well-being, and also, the trust and communication of their team. And then finally, I would say employees, that we can be more emotionally available for one another. So, workplace initiatives that help train us to, be open and to share and to be honest, to be vulnerable, to connect. Sometimes that doesn't come easily. And sometimes our workplaces, especially now sort of scattered across continents or states or cities, it's difficult to find ways to do that. But I think that when we can be emotionally available for the other people that we work with, then we create a net of support. And the one thing that contributes most to our mental well-being is going to be our social network and the people that are there for us that we can rely on.
Brilliant. Have you seen anything else, Jess?
In terms of what makes a positive kind of workplace mental health wise? Well, for me, I think it's the two-way communication in terms of how an organization operates. Like, I think for a really long time, especially in creative industries, it feels a need like, this is our amazing culture that you can become part of when you join this industry. But it's like, well, who sets that culture and who's it for, and is it inclusive of everyone? And I think, being open to adapt your ways of working to the ways that people need, your employees need, to be open to, being super inclusive about your methods of working, which is not that hard, really. It's just kind of listening to the people you work with and understanding what they need, and being very open from a communication point of view around what that looks like.
I think, Ash, like you brought up, I think what I often see when people ask that kind of question is that, oh, somebody else must have done this. Can we take it and use it in our place? And it's not a tick the box. It's not a package that you can buy. A lot of the things that you talked about were like, how do we be more human, right? Like, how do we look out for each other? How do we make sure that, we kind of give a shit about what people might be going through, either at work or not, or outside of work as well. And I think a lot of the time, like, we see that am always getting asked by agencies, like, who does it well? Who's got best practice? And it's like, well, it can't be a one size fits all, because, and also I think there's often a case of, leaders love to fix things, right? Like, most leaders would be horrified to find out that there was a mental health problem in their business.
Yeah.
But then they would also want to go and fix it. And what works for them doesn't always work for everybody else.
Yeah.
And so I think I've seen a really good example of a large agency. I wouldn't say they're amazing by any means, but they've given space to a few people within the agencies, within the agency, not in leadership, to go and try and have a crack at the problem. And I think allowing the solution to kind of come up rather than be forced down is also quite a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the 6 a.m. yoga classes go in when they're also expecting people to work till midnight, and half of them are parents, and it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. It's like,
no one likes yoga,
You're just slapping on that as like, we're doing something, and here, like, everyone, please be calm and be happy now, because we've given you a juice bar, so congratulations. It's just it's totally unreasonable.
Corporate yoga must end. Let me do that in my own time, Jesus. Okay.
All right, Jess, back to you.
Here we go.
What's reasonable when it comes to overtime? Extra weekends and nights seem to be relentless. How do I say no and not lose my job?
Okay. Extra weekends, relentless extra weekends and nights are completely unreasonable. They're in no world are they reasonable. There should be, it just shouldn't happen. And in so many other industries, A, you'd never be asked, or B, you'd be compensated on the rare occasions that you are required to do that. So first things first, it's completely wrong. There's something wrong massively with the organization or the culture if you're being asked to work late every single night and on a lot of weekends. It's not sustainable. And to me, it just suggests you're in an unsafe working environment. In terms of how you say no, I think, again, it's about making sure that you raise the issue with your manager or your boss and whoever else needs to hear it, because they can't say that they don't know it's affecting you once you've told them. And again, also safety in numbers. If you feel like it's really hard to broach it yourself, talk to your peers and do it together. The more of you who say that it's not sustainable, the better. If they don't listen and they keep trying to make you work those hours, take stress leave and look for another job. It's just not worth it. And those sorts of practices are so bad and so damaging. And it just infuriates me that there are still agencies that insist upon them wholesale. And it makes me even madder because it's my generation now who are in leadership positions, and we know better. We've been through this. There is no excuse. The pandemic is not an excuse. The client demands are not an excuse. Pitches are not an excuse. You cannot treat people like that. It's wrong. It's creating a really unhealthy, unsafe workplace. So I'm sorry that you're being put in that position. You shouldn't have to be put in that position. It's not a reflection on you giving up or in any way you not being able to hack it or anything like that. If you refuse to work those hours, it's on them. It's not on you. And yeah, I'm really sorry that people are still being put in that position. And there are plenty of agencies who won't do that anymore.
That's brilliant.
That's all.
Drop the mic.
Yeah, no, it really shits me, man.
Yeah. I think that's excellent advice. We were just talking, I was telling Jess and Ash earlier how we're breaking up all of these questions to put as just resources on the website at the moment. And I think there's one about how to say no to overtime, which will be a great one for everyone to be able to rewatch. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Ash, I'm going to come to you. We've got 20 minutes. There's a couple of questions that are sat in the question box as well. So please, if you do have any others, get them in there and we'll try and get to them before the end. Okay. My rent's gone up. Every other price of things seem to be going up and I'm under real pressure financially. I keep hearing how our business is struggling, although we're always profitable. I have to make more money. How can I have this chat with my boss? Why can't this industry afford to pay people better?
Yeah, so I'm going to sort of come to it, I guess, from more of a psychological viewpoint, and I'll throw it to you guys after. I think, firstly, it sounds like you're in a really, difficult spot. That feeling of pressure, particularly financial pressure. We know that financial precarity is incredibly highly correlated with sort of mental health conditions, and that feeling that you don't or you won't have enough money to be able to pay for everything you need to pay for is really, really hard. And yes, I get that, what's happening at the moment with the economy means that, prices are going up. However, in these types of sort of creative industries too, we are very apprehensive at times, particularly if you've got certain types of personalities, to have these conversations, which can be quite confronting. I've got no doubt that the thought of having this conversation, maybe for you, considering that you've asked this question, might bring up some almost like feelings inside your body, some feelings of, if you get really close into it, and maybe like feelings in your gut, feelings of maybe feeling squirmy, almost feeling tense or anxious. This is completely normal. We read these feelings often and we go, maybe these feelings are showing up because I shouldn't say anything. Like I shouldn't ask for more money. My body is telling me it's not a good idea. And your body's probably reading a couple of different signals here. It's probably reading the fact that you don't want to cause a fuss. Maybe you don't want to be that person at work or that person to your boss. You want to maintain this kind of easygoing image. A lot of us like to be, the easygoing employee, the person who doesn't cause a fuss. However, we need to recognize what our needs are, and sometimes our needs change. And we need to make our sort of employees or our boss aware of that when those changes occur. So when it comes to having these difficult conversations, sometimes it can be worth going, okay, well, I might not get the answer that I want. And that's always a possibility. The outcome could be that your boss says no. However, there is also a possibility that your boss says yes. And that possibility might not occur at all if you hadn't have had the conversation. So sometimes these difficult and challenging conversations are going to be necessary. They might not only happen in workplaces, they might also happen within your relationships. They might happen with your kids, with friends. There's going to be times when you're going to have to talk about something that might not make you look the sort of way that you're comfortable looking to others, but you recognize that there's needs there. There's needs there that could only be met in consultation with other people around you. And so the conversations are important. And I would say, that if you're bringing this up here in this forum, it sounds like this is important to you. And it sounds like this is a conversation that's important to have. What do you reckon, Jess?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that you have enough pressure at work not to then be constantly fretting about your financial situation, and you're probably being underpaid if you can't make ends meet. That said, when you ask for a pay rise, probably don't mention your rent increase. Just, I think, do the research, find out what your peers are being paid and what other people at your level are being paid. Find out what is reasonable. And going super confidently from that point of view, hey, hey, look at all these projects I've been doing, or look at all this work I've been doing. I've been on this salary for a while now. This is what, blah-de-blah. And I've, spoken to so-and-so, like a few people from different agencies, and this is the salary expectation for my experience and my level. And I'd really love to have a chat to you about, possibly, about locking in a pay increase, and just ask, that way.
And you can practice that conversation too. I think sometimes we're scared that we're going to fumble, we're going to say the wrong thing. And obviously got it laid out, just like Jess said, have rehearsed the conversation, if you like, a few times with people that you trust. Make yourself feel a little bit more comfortable going into that conversation.
Great. Okay. Jess, you're so famous on asking for a friend that you have your own question, which is next. So this was addressed to you.
Aww.
I struggle to get my own shit together most of the time. Jess, what coping mechanisms do you have to run a business, have a family, and everything else that you do?
I love the idea that there's an appearance that I have my shit together. That is awesome. And I really don't want to burst that bubble. However, it's all an accident. No, actually, there's a couple of ways I can answer this. Part of it is, it's all happened. The world is, you can't plan everything, and my life has happened the way it's happened. And sometimes it's delightful and sometimes it isn't. But I think there's a few things that help me keep doing what I do. One is support. I share parenting, and my kids go to childcare and after school care and those sorts of things, because there's no way, I could keep working the way I do and have all my other interests without that. So I think don't put expectations on yourself to be able to do everything. I also have enormous support in terms of an amazing business partner. So I certainly don't do that by myself. And then in terms of the other things I do outside of work, I think I realized a long time ago in our industry, we're not really accountable for what we do, in the sense that, we get paid to be creative. We don't necessarily kind of contribute we're not necessarily accountable to culture. And so I think a lot of the other stuff that I do is part of my drive to feel accountable in a way, and to still be connected to the broader society that we live in, and be connected to culture, so that I know that I'm not just off creating creating something damaging, which is possible when you smash kind of creativity and commerce together. And also, it's also kind of, in a way, a long time ago, I realized I felt a lot more bulletproof at work if I had my sense of self and my sense of creative achievements not all tied up in what I do at work. I have a lot of other projects, and some of them get finished, some of them don't, some of them are ongoing. And most of them also ensure that I kind of am part of other communities outside of work. And after experiencing, a time when I did get sucked into the vortex of just a real bad work vortex, where really it was just, my life was too much about work and nothing else. And then all of my sense of self was tied up in that. And I realized that was really damaging. I kind of realized I need to have some connection. I need to be grounded to communities in other ways. So that's how I managed to do what I do, through drive, accidents, and having to keep 2 children alive. Like, I've got no choice on that front. And also, like, running a business, I had to leave advertising. I got to the end of my road. Incidentally, that's an interesting thing that comes out of the report in terms of a lack of female creative leadership in the industry, and that is a cultural problem in the industry, but I'm really glad I did. But I think that that's what's right for me. But I think you just need to be honest, true to yourself and what you need to do. And if that's just sitting on the couch reading a book, then so be it. And I love that I look like I've got my shit together, but don't compare yourself to other people, because I definitely don't have my shit together. I'm sure you have your shit together more than I do.
I think there's some great stuff in there around, like, sometimes it looks like someone is doing so much, but actually you're doing it for you as well.
Totally.
Like, that's the other thing. You're not necessarily like pulled from pillar to post, but you're finding meaning, and you're contributing because that's what you want to do. I think that's always like, that's really well articulated, and something to be admired. Like, that's what keeps you going.
You have to follow your passion, I think.
Yeah. So Ash, I might come to you with this next question, because I think it sort of allows you almost to answer the same question in a way as well, which is, how do you maintain work-life balance?
Isn't that just the holy grail of all questions? The phrase and the word balance, I kind of call bullshit a bit on it, because I think that it implies that our life and our work, we can sort of measure out in some sort of scaled way to optimize our own, well-being and connectedness and productivity, or whatever it is. And I just don't think that is realistic. I think that one thing we know for sure about human nature and about the societies that we live in is that we're constantly in flux. We're constantly in motion. Nothing stays the same for too long. I'm sure that you never feel the same way for too long. Things around you are constantly changing. Even when you might feel in those precious moments, oh, I have my shit together. I'm pretty sure that doesn't last for too long. Like even if you don't change anything, the world changes. That change is inevitable. So I kind of see it a little bit more as a gentle negotiation. Work and life, they do have to coexist, but our needs will change and shift according to what changes are going on in our body, what's happening at home, with our family, with our kids, with our relationships, with our friends, and also what's happening with work. One thing that I would sort of stress here though is that you do need to notice when your negotiations are being shifted far too much to one side, particularly in the work realm. We can very easily fall into the trap of being consumed and feeling like all of our priorities and all of our energy and attention needs to be invested there, and it just causes us to neglect a lot of other really important parts of our lives, such as our own sort of physical and mental health. We start saying no to all the things that are good for us, the things that help us sustain ourselves. We start saying no to socializing with our friends, or we start to think that spending time with our kids is a waste. So you need to really, I guess, check in with, this is like Psych 101, but your values. Why do you do what you do? Why do you live the life you lead? What's important to you? What are the things that, you want? If someone would get up and make a speech about your life in 25 years' time, what would you want them to say? David Brooks has a really amazing way of breaking this down. He calls them eulogy virtues versus resume virtues. So often we live too hard for the resume virtues. We live for the shit that's going to look good to a future employer. However, what really makes life rich and purposeful and meaningful? The shit that people get up and say about you at your funeral, right? We want to, be spoken about in ways that make us feel like we've lived a rich, fulfilling life. So have a little bit of a think. It might take some soul searching, some time spent alone, some reflection. But if we can lead with our values, I think then that's a good cue as to how we can maybe try to balance things a little better.
I want them to say she had her shit together.
I think I just found the article maybe that you're referring to, so I'll just drop that into the chat.
Sweet.
That's great. Fantastic. Okay, we've got 2 more questions actually. Another one that just came in. I think this one's a statement, but I think maybe it would be good to go like, what would you do in this situation? So a company promoted me from designer to creative and brand manager at no salary increase. I manage APAC, UK, and US. My workload got even harder when they made all the other designers redundant except me. They keep ignoring my salary questions. I feel like they have no respect to designers, assuming it's easy. I feel like there's one obvious answer to this situation, which is there's probably somewhere better that will respect you. But any other advice?
Oh, I feel like you're in a really hard position because the promotions happened and the workload has changed, and they're avoiding the conversation. It's really hard. I mean, yeah, my advice would be to fix up your resume and get your folio happening and look for another job at that position now that you know that you can do it, that senior role that will pay you what you're worth. It's not, again, it's really unethical of a company to promote anyone into a role of greater responsibility without compensating them financially. We don't work in a freaking charity sector. This is the value of your labor has increased and you're not being compensated for it, and that's wrong.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, again, like you mentioned earlier as well, like being able to look at other jobs around you and see what they pay, and being able to compare that to what you could get elsewhere. It sounds like in this case that you've tried pretty hard to ask the question,
Incredibly disrespectful to not even have the conversation or give you an explanation why, or even put in
or even a path
frame,
to it,
you know, and say, okay, you know, yep, you've been promoted with all these responsibilities, and this is going to be the time frame for a pay increase or whatever. To completely leave it is it's bad.
Yeah. I think, and I think there's one of those things of like, you can look at, you know, if you get a performance review or anything like that, or you can ask for one and start to be able to say, hey, do you think I'm doing a good job? Because if they don't think you're doing a good job, then, you know, maybe that's the reason why, and you don't know it and they haven't given you that feedback. But if they don't turn around and say, hey, you're doing a great job, then, you know, that's more fuel to be able to say, well, then surely I'm more valuable. Okay, next question. Mass layoffs are part of the ad industry where people say you haven't really worked in the industry until you face being laid off. What can people do for their mental health? It's a little bit depressing. What can people do for their mental health in mass layoffs, whether it be survivor's guilt or even as one of the people caught in mass layoffs? I think that's quite interesting, isn't it? That idea that, you know, it's not as easy. Well, it's not easy either for the people that are kind of, you know, still there or left behind. Ash, would you like to go first?
Yeah, I guess I'll just briefly, you know, mention that in either one of those cases, when you lose work or you're seeing a lot of other people lose work and you're feeling guilty that you're still around, that is going to bring up a lot of discomfort. You know, again, especially when we link our self-worth, our identity very closely to the work that we're doing. These type of events are really going to impact us emotionally. So the first thing that I would say is to just go gently on yourself. Like if you are feeling it, that's a normal and completely human response, you know, and some would say probably even a type of grief, a grief for the people that you've lost, or a grief for the role that you've lost. And any type of loss to us as humans hurts. It hurts. It feels really, really fucking bad. So I think if you can allow yourself to acknowledge that there is going to be some pain, and I would say that doesn't make you, you know, worthy of having a mental health condition. Yes, when bad things happen, we hurt, and that is a completely human response. In saying that too, you know, you're talking about how you might, you know, do something for your mental health. That is to make sure that you can support yourself in other ways, because what normally happens is if we're feeling low, we can start to almost surrender everything else that was supporting us. So we can start to stop doing the things that keep us healthy. So we can, you know, neglect our either physical things, you know, that are really important, like food and diet and exercise and sleep, which are absolutely critical to mental health. But we can also cut off from other people, or we can isolate, which again causes us to just go deeper and deeper down that hole. And that's where we really see mental health conditions start to germinate. So allow yourself to feel, allow, you know, yourself to acknowledge that this is really shitty and that it hurts, and don't beat yourself up for that, because then that's just adding another level of, you know, guilt or shame on top of that loss that your body is already processing.
I just want to be clear, when I said this is getting depressing, I'm not talking about the questions. These questions are really essential, and I'm glad that this forum exists to answer them. It's more the industry that I find really depressing. I reckon, to Ash's point, it's really important that you connect with other people who are experiencing the same thing that you're experiencing. But I think also to if it's possible, to separate yourself personally from what has happened from the situation, and to understand that, because what's really hard about something like that, rather than choosing to resign and leaving on your own terms, is the sudden lack of security and lack of control, and the sense that you've done something wrong to cause this. And it's very easy to get a little bit caught up in that. What could I have done differently? When did this start? Why did I get chosen and not so-and-so or whatever? But I think to the point of the original question, it does happen so often. And there's it is literally a line item in a budget that says, you know, the books have to balance like this by the end of this month, which is X number of salaries. You know, it's so far out of your control. And And I think it's to go through that grieving period and then try and move on from it as well quite quickly, because what you don't want it to do is affect your confidence in terms of what you do next.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you're right. Like, this is it's one of those other kind of unique dynamics of this industry where you can lose an account and therefore you've got to lose all the people that work on it. So it shows that, you know, that's not a personal thing, but also it is, you know, when you can kind of find peace with it, it's the part where, you know, actually sometimes great things come out of adversity.
Absolutely.
And you know, there are some great examples there where people have been, you know, let go and then, you know, created something as a result. And
in hindsight, you'll realize that job was not for you, you know?
Yeah.
And in terms of survivor's guilt, there was a survivor's guilt question there, wasn't there?
Yeah. Did you have a view on survivor's guilt?
No, I just didn't want to not answer that part of the question. Ash, over to you.
Oh yeah, no, we did. Ash was there with survivor's guilt.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Good. Sorry, I missed that.
It's all good. And we did have, I remember that getting asked quite a bit during COVID.
Yeah.
You know, that whole kind of thing, like people being laid off and the survivor's guilt piece. So I'll try and find a way to just push that one to the top if anyone wants to go and find it on the Never Not Creative site. So we're about time. It's 1:30. Thank you so much, Ash and Jess, for great advice, great stories, you know, great being able to share some of the experiences that you've had and how you cope with things as well. We'll be back next month, first Thursday of the month. You can go and register now if you like, in fact. And we're so organized next month. We have Nikki Bryson and Martine Beaumont joining us. So that's going to be another great Asking for a Friend. A reminder that the Mentally Healthy survey is now open. So in the chat, please do go and grab that and share it far and wide, please, so that, you know, it really sets the results of that really set the agenda for what we do in the coming year. So yes, fantastic. Thanks once again. We'll see everyone next month.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bye.